Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag, and this is a way for me to update all of you on what books I have read this year so far, which ones have been my favorites, which ones I haven't liked as much. So without further ado, let's get started. The first question is best book you've read in 2021 so far. So there are actually a lot of books that I would consider to be my favorites that I've read this year. But if I were to objectively be deciding which ones are best, then I have two books that come to mind. The first one is The Count of Monte Cristo. This is a historical fiction adventure that tells the story of Edmond Dante, who is a man who has been imprisoned for a crime he has not committed. There in the Isle of Monte Cristo, he soon learns that there is a hidden hoard of treasure in the island. So it soon becomes his plan to not only escape, but to find this treasure to use it to plot the destruction of the three men responsible for his incarceration. The reason why this book is not only one of my favorites or one of the best I have read this year, but one of my all-time favorites in general is because the plot feels very clever and carefully crafted. Nothing, not even the subplots, are left unfinished, which makes reading and reaching the end of the book feel very satisfactory to read. And I genuinely enjoyed following a lot of the characters. They all feel like very real people because they are all incredibly flawed. No one is completely good or selfless, which really helps build and develop the themes of losing yourself, revenge, and many others that are explored throughout this book. I gave this book 5 stars because I genuinely enjoyed reading every single page. I was entertained the whole way through, so if you're looking for an adventure to have a very fun time with, then I definitely recommend this one. The next book I want to talk about is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is a historical fiction romance that tells the story of the old Hollywood icon Evelyn Hugo. Evelyn is all of a sudden ready to tell the whole world about her fantastic, glamorous, but tragic life. And she chooses unknown reporter Monique Grant for the job and will not take anyone else. So Monique takes advantage of this opportunity to jumpstart her career and write Evelyn's biography. So here is where Evelyn's story begins. From making her way to Los Angeles for the first time in the 50s, to her decision to leave the show business in the 80s, and of course, the 7 husbands along the way. Evelyn's story is a tale of ambition, unexpected friendship, and a great forbidden love. Soon as Evelyn's story begins to end, Monique realizes and it becomes apparent that her life is connected to Evelyn's in tragic, unexpected ways. As soon as I started reading this book, I genuinely could not put it down. It is a character-focused story, and with its characters is where this book truly shines. Evelyn is a realistic, flawed, but very interesting character to read. Evelyn feels very real because the author does not brush over Evelyn's flaws, meaning she doesn't pretend that Evelyn is a completely good person because, well, she isn't. Through her story, we learn so many lessons along with her, especially ones about the true meaning of success and the importance of having meaningful relationships in our lives. We get to see her progress as a person and change as she grows up, which makes us understand why she makes certain decisions later on in the story. Even though she's flawed, she also isn't completely unlikable. Evelyn is ambitious, brave, and compassionate as well. She's truly an unforgettable character, and after finishing the book, I wanted to get to know even more about her, and I wanted to even watch some of her movies because she just feels so real. It truly feels like you just spent a lot of time with this person and really got to know who they are. The journey through Evelyn's life is one full of love and loss, mistakes and redemption, and one that is completely unforgettable, and the author does a fantastic job at making you feel all the emotions along the way. I highly recommend this book, and I think absolutely everyone would have a great time reading it. And even if romance isn't exactly your thing, This is more of a subplot to the story because it's truly a character study of this interesting and complex person. I can't recommend this book enough. The next question is best sequel you've read in 2021 so far. So out of the 5 or 6 series that I have read this year, it turns out that a lot of my favorite books from those series are, well, the sequels. So I ended up going with 3 I want to talk about in this section. The first one is Catching Fire, which is the sequel to the beloved and very famous Hunger Games. The reason why I chose to talk about this one is because it's my favorite out of the whole trilogy. I really love the characters that are introduced and the relationships and friendships that are explored in this book. The author is able to transmit the emotions and the intensity of the games in this book especially well. I also really liked how instead of Katniss having to work alone, in this one she has to work with other contestants, so we get to see a lot more challenges the contestants might face in order to survive, and we get to see very different strategies, which makes the book feel very intense and feel very creative still, even though we already lived through the games once before. Overall, I think this is such an engaging, entertaining, and action-filled novel, and I really enjoyed it. The next sequel I am going to be talking about is the sequel to the Six of Crows book, which is Crooked Kingdom. The reason I want to talk about this book is because I think that it's not only the best in this duology, but also one of the best in the entire Grishaverse. I think the characters were incredibly and much more developed in this book, which made them go from great characters to me to some of my all-time favorites. I think the action was very well executed and very intense, which made me feel very engaged the whole way through. And going back to the characters, their emotional journeys was incredibly well done and well executed. I loved being able to see their struggles as a team and as a group in their last final high-stand adventure, but also getting to see the different perspectives and their independent struggles and emotional journeys, which really made this book go from great to exceptional. I also think the writing is obviously fantastic in both the slower emotional scenes and the action-packed intense ones. The final sequel I will be talking about is the second book in the King of Scars duology, which is Rule of Wolves. The thing is, King of Scars did not completely work for me. I felt overall underwhelmed, and it was a pretty okay book plot-wise. But then I read Rule of Wolves, and not only did this make me realize how much I love this duology, but also how much I truly love the Grishaverse as a whole. I really liked how it tied all the stories together into one, the story of Shadow and Bone, Six of Crows, and obviously King of Scars, because it made it turn out to be such an epic final adventure that had me so excited to the point where I was screaming while reading the book. I think the characters really shine in this book and really stand out. They're some of my all-time favorite characters I have ever read, especially because we get to see their different perspectives and the different points of view this story has, so it makes a very engaging novel overall. And the world Leigh Bardugo created and her magic system really stands out in this novel to create such an epic final adventure and final book in an entire series of novels. It definitely raised my standards to be even higher for finale books and future series. The next question is new release you haven't read yet but want to, and for this one I have 2 books in mind. The first one is The Midnight Library. This is a contemporary fantasy that tells the story about Nora, a 30-something-year-old woman who is regretful about her life and feels alienated and unneeded in this world. Unexpectedly, she comes across the Midnight Library. In it, each book represents a portal into a different variation of what her life could have been. The reason why I want to read this book is because the plot honestly sounds very interesting. The concept of being able to see how different your life could have been depending on a different choice you could have made in the past is something that I haven't really read about before, and it's a very interesting concept to follow. The next book I am looking forward to read at some point this year is Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. This is a young adult contemporary that tells the story of Maverick, a 17-year-old high school senior and a member of the King Lord's gang in Garden Heights, which is the fictional Black neighborhood where this author set both of her previous novels, The Hate You Give and On the Come Up. I want to read this novel because I love Angie Thomas's work. Both The Hate You Give and On the Come Up are incredible books, and she's just an author that has to tell and create very important and meaningful stories that I think absolutely everyone should take the time to read. The next question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And for this one, I definitely have to mention Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. This is a sequel for the beautiful book that is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. It comes out on October 12th of 2021, and I recently read the first book and it was such a charming, wonderful story to read. I absolutely love both of the main protagonists so much because they are both such unique and relatable characters. It's a story with so much meaning and thought put behind it, and I am looking forward to continue reading and following these characters, and I also really recommend that all of you read the first book if you haven't already. The next question is biggest disappointment, and for this one, I am going to be talking about books that I thought I was going to end up loving or really liking, but I overall felt underwhelmed in the end. Neither of these books are bad, so please don't let this discourage you in any way from reading them. If you have read them, please let me know what you thought in the comments, but these are just books that didn't completely work for me. And the first one is the beloved and very well-known The Great Gatsby. This is set in Jazz Age New York, and it tells the story of Jay Gatsby, a self-made millionaire, and his pursuit for Daisy, a young woman who he loved in his youth. Overall, I think I liked the concept and idea behind the book more than I liked the book and story itself. I especially felt that Jay Gatsby's character was very interesting, and I was eager to know more about him and this glamorous life that he has made for himself, but that is centered around false appearances. However, I felt underwhelmed in the end. I got unengaged while reading. I didn't care about the characters, which honestly just led me to feel uninterested in the rest of the book. However, I do see why a lot of people like it and why it's considered a classic, but it just didn't work out for me in the end. And another book that ended up disappointing me is They Both Die at the End. This is a contemporary novel set on September 5th when a little after midnight, Mateo and Rufus receive a call from Deathcast. They are both going to die today. So Mateo and Rufus, for different reasons, are both looking to make a friend on their end date. There is luckily an app for that called The Last Friend, and they're able to meet up through it. And this way they are able to live a lifetime in a single day. Before I get into the things that did not work, I want to mention the things that I did like about this book. First thing I thought stood out to me was the concept. Being able to have a program that tells you when you're going to die and seeing how two teenagers would react to this is something I've honestly never seen done before. So I thought the concept and whole idea was very creative, original, and unique. So I was excited to go into this book. The other thing I did like were the relationships and friendships the main characters had with other people in their lives before this date and the one they end up building with each other. And as for the things I did not like, the first thing was the romance. Yes, it had its adorable moments, but because I wasn't emotionally invested with the characters, I had an even harder time believing the romance when it actually happened. I felt like it had no build-up, and I found it hard to believe that it was all happening in under 24 hours. Another thing that did not work for me was the writing style, because during certain point of view chapters for the main protagonist, I felt like the internal dialogue, their thoughts, and the conversations between them felt unnatural, and like teenagers wouldn't actually be saying those things, which just made me feel more disconnected with the story. However, this book does explore very meaningful themes, topics, and ideas, and it really had me thinking days after I finished the novel. So overall, I liked it and I had a pretty fun time with it, but it just did not work out for me because I was expecting to love it a lot, and I just felt underwhelmed in the end. The next question is biggest surprise, and this one definitely goes to a series I read this year called All the Young Dudes. This is a fanfiction series about the Harry Potter characters known as the Marauders, and it is told from the perspective of Remus Lupin during their years at Hogwarts. So I never read fanfiction, and I was really hesitant to pick this book series up because of that. But I saw that everyone in the Marauders fandom that had read these books absolutely adored them, so I decided to give them a try. And after a few pages of not really enjoying it, I continued going, and oh my goodness, that is the best decision I have ever made. I absolutely love this book series. It fits into the Harry Potter world perfectly, and it is truly amazing. It has an incredible and great exploration of love, grief, growth as people, and watching these characters grow up is really impactful and honestly had me crying at the end. I also think that the characters are very unique, well developed, and are all very flawed, but we watch them grow up and change as people. So it truly makes for great character arcs and some of the best I've actually ever seen. I also think that the character relationships and friendships are incredibly well executed and definitely the highlight of my reading experience with these books. I know fanfiction might seem a little bit silly, and it most definitely did to me, but if it's as good as this series, then it definitely deserves all the respect and praise in the world. The next question is favorite new author, debut, or new to you? And this definitely goes to Jane Austen. I read her books in January and February of this year, and I had such a fun time with each and every single one of them. I also think that she has some of the best character arcs I have ever had the pleasure of reading. I love her writing style. It's beautiful, hilarious, and you can really see her personality get transmitted into the characters and the story, and it creates this very unique style to her books. Now we have newest fictional crush, and this one goes to Mr. Nikolai Lansov from the Grisha original trilogy and the King of Stars duology. When he is first introduced in Siege and Storm, the second book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, he is a lovable, charismatic, and brave character. Then in King of Stars and Rule of Wolves, there is a layer of depth that is added to his character, and we get to know even more about him, which makes him even more lovable and a very interesting character. And I am so excited to see him in season 2 of Shadow and Bone. I recommend reading the Grishaverse because he is a fantastic character. The next question is newest favorite character. There are actually a lot of favorite characters I have that come from books I have read this year, so I am going to briefly mention those and then go in depth with the ones that I haven't mentioned in this video before. First off, we have the Crows from the Six of Crows duology, then the Marauders from All the Young Dudes, and Evelyn Hugo from the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And I'm going to now talk about the set of characters from the House in the Cerulean Sea. The House on the Cerulean Sea is a fantasy about Linus Baker, who leads a quiet, solitary life. He is a caseworker for the Department in Care of Magical Youth, where he spends his days overseeing the well-being of children in government-sanctioned orphanages. One day, Linus is unexpectedly summoned by extremely upper management, and he's given a highly classified task, and that is to travel to Marseille's Island Orphanage, where 6 dangerous children reside: a gnome, a sprite, a wyvern, an unidentifiable green blob, a weird Pomeranian, and the Antichrist. Linus must set aside his fears and determine whether or not these children are likely to bring the end of days. This book is actually also one of my favorites, not only that I have read this year, but in general. The characters and relationships that are built and made in this book are absolutely fantastic and so sweet. Each character brings something different to the table. They all have their part to play in the story, and they all add so much depth, and we see how each one of them is different from each other and how they really have their own personality, their own flaws, their own amazing things that the rest of the world, because of prejudice, doesn't see. But we get to see these characters and for who they really are. We also even get to know more about Linus as he realizes all the mistakes he's making, but he changes those because of these children and the set of people that he has found and now calls his family. The relationship and found family that is explored in this book is very unique to this story. We get to also form a part of this family, just like Linus as well. The next question is a book that made you cry, and there are actually a lot of books that have made me cry this year, but I'm going to be talking about And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer for this question. This is a contemporary novella that tells the story of an elderly man's struggle to hold on to his most precious memories and his family's efforts to care for him even as they must find a way to let go. This book made me cry because it has so many bittersweet moments. As we learn more about this man, we get to know him more and more, so you end up absolutely adoring his character and feeling every emotion and everything that he is going through throughout the story. You also feel for his family and his loved ones, specifically his nephew Noah, and feel as they realize that they are slowly having to let go of someone they really care about. Overall, it is an amazing story with wonderful characters. It really surprised me how much impact and meaning a 70-page novella can truly have, and I really recommend this one. The next question is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received, and for this one I'm actually going to choose a book I think is beautiful because of its content, not necessarily because of the design, although the book cover is very pretty as well, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This is a historical fiction fantasy set in France in the year 1714. In a moment of desperation, a young woman makes a bargain to live forever, but the catch is that she is cursed to be forgotten by everyone she meets. This is where the extraordinary life of Addie LaRue begins. We experience a dazzling adventure that will play out across years and continents, across history and art, as a young woman tries to find a way where she can leave her mark on the world. But everything changes when, nearly 300 years later, Addie stumbles across a young man in a hidden bookstore who remembers her name. One of the things that stands out about this book is a beautiful and artistic writing style. The premise is interesting and unique, and although this book did not completely work out for me in the end, story-wise, the writing is something that definitely stood out to me the whole way through. It had so many beautiful quotes and wonderfully written moments that I ended up taking a pause from the book to just write these quotes down because of how beautiful they were. The story felt very atmospheric, alluring, and the style of storytelling is remarkable and very unique and it makes the book feel like the art Addie is admiring throughout the story. I definitely recommend this book because it has incredible storytelling and beautiful writing. And the last question is, what books do you want to read by the end of the year? And I actually have a very long list of books I want to get to before this year ends, but higher in my priorities are classics. I want to read more of those because last year I started reading them and I generally really enjoy them. But if I were to choose a specific set of classics, it would be the Bronte Sisters collection, which is actually over here. More specifically, Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, just because those books are very loved and very highly praised. So I'm really excited to get to them. Well, that is the end of the tag. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please let me know what has been the best book you've read so far in 2021, or which one has been the biggest disappointment to you. Let me know your thoughts and what other book-related content you want to see next. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.